the Oxford Jurisprudence Discussion Group. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Professor Vassilis Voutsakis, who is Associate Professor in Philosophy of Law at the University of Athens. He completed his undergraduate studies at the Faculty of Law, and he is now an academic. And his graduate students at the University of Paris II and the University of Paris I, Sorbonne. Thank you very much for being with us today, Professor Voutsakis. The topic of his presentation is Law and Morality According to Kant, the People of Devil's Argument.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and also thank you for the opportunity you gave me to travel out of Greece for the first time after 2 years. So it's a really experience. As you know, by the text I sent you, the title of my talk is going to be Law and Morality According to Kant, the argument from the people of Devils. I start with a small introduction. The relationship between law and morality is still in the center of philosophical and legal discussions. Is the validity of a legal provision independent of its moral character, as positivists believe, or rather is the validity of such a provision dependent on its moral character, as ontologists? And if so, what does the dependence question consist in? For instance, is the moral character of a legal provision condition of its validity or of its efficacy, that is, of its possibility to be actually implemented? And the questions do not stop at this point. To give just an example, even among those who insist on the necessary relation between law and morality, other questions, perhaps more subtle and interesting, are still pending. What are the moral conditions on which the validity or the efficacy of the provision depend? Is human nature the key to that problem, or should we instead look for some moral requirements? Hence, we are confronted with many and demanding questions. Questions that can be answered by means of conceptual tools we might find in the thought of the great classical philosophers. Not because we do need the assurance of the prestige, but because those questions, despite other social historical differences that might be relevant, touch upon vital aspects of our own postmodern or simply modern condition. This is perhaps how we might explain the revitalization of the interest on the practical, that is, moral, political, and legal philosophy of Immanuel Kant we have been witnessing these last years. It is as if, although the great achievements of contemporary Kantians, especially for John Rawls and successors, cannot be contested, the corpus of Kant's text might provide insightful answers to those questions. Hence, a rather peculiar application. We have at our disposal many and stimulating interpretations of the Kantian text, many stimulating and opposed to each other. Let us, for instance, compare Kant with Aristotle and Hobbes. Only few scholars claim that Aristotle has elaborated the theory of political rights. The immense majority of the Stagirites commentators think that the very concept of a political right has no place within the Aristotelian theory of man as a political animal. There are also only some Hobbes scholars who hold that man's motivation in the natural condition is moral in a robust sense. However, most commentators of Leviathan consider the moral character of such motivation as elementary. Things look radically different, however, in the case of Kant. Two eminent philosophers of law, who moreover belong to different philosophical traditions, Michel Deleuze, he was a Thomist, and Jeremy Walden, who you might know, I think he was here in Oxford, would not object to the verdict of Wolfgang Casting, an eminent Kantian scholar who writes that for Kant, morality is neither a condition of constitution nor a presupposition of maintenance of a juridical condition. At the same time, Raymond Brown would underwrite Christine Koska's statement that ethics encompasses all our duties. Let us leave for the moment the question of such hermeneutical conflicts aside and focus instead on the specific topic that we're going to deal with. According to the well-known passage of Toward Perpetual Peace, written in 1795, quote, "Now, a republican constitution is the only one that is completely compatible with the rights of human beings, but it's also the most difficult to establish, is even more maintained, so much so that many assert it would have to be a state made up of angels, because human beings with the self-seeking inclinations would not be capable of such a sublime form of constitution. But now, nature comes to the aid of the general will grounded in reason, revered but imported in practice, and does so precisely through those self-seeking inclinations. So that it is a matter of organization of the state, which is certainly within the capacity of human beings, of arranging those forces of nature in opposition to one another in such a way that one checks the destructive effect of the other, or even cancels it, so that the result for reason turns out if neither of them existed at all, and the human being is constrained to become a good citizen, even if not a morally good human being. The problem of establishing a state, no matter how hard it may sound, is soluble even for a nation of devils, if only they have understanding, and goes like this. Given a multitude of rational beings, all of whom need general laws for their own preservation, but each of whom is inclined cowardly to exempt himself from them, so to order this multitude and establish the constitution, that although in their private dispositions they strive against each other, these yet check on another, that in their public conduct the result is the same as if they had no such evil dispositions. Such a problem must be solved, for the problem is not the moral improvement of human beings, for it's not the case that a good state constitution is to be expected from inner morality. On the contrary, the good moral education of the people is to be expected from a good state constitution. Why is this passage interesting? For at least two reasons. First, because of the way some particular beings, the devils, are conceived, and second, because of the role which is assigned to the devils concerning the republican state, that is, the civil constitution which guarantees the person's rights. In some, because of the way Kant treats those two fundamentals, especially in the light of the positivism versus anti-positivism debate issues. In other words, this passage gives us the opportunity to reflect upon the relation between law, republican law, needless to say, and morality. The dilemma might be formulated as follows. Are the arguments of those who claim that Kant is a proto-positivist valid? Or on the contrary, is it rather the case that this passage permits a more nuanced interpretation of the relation between law, morality, and politics? I will argue in favor of the second horn of this dilemma. The people of Deville's argument, I will claim, points toward a conception of law connected to morality, and for this precise reason, differentiate from a moralistic morality. I would like to anticipate here an objection that might be raised. It can be argued that this passage has no theoretical ambitions, and thus it cannot be compared to other texts written by Kant, especially Metaphysics of Moral, written 2 years later, which, according to the well-considered view, reflects the mature and hence definitive attitude of Kant towards the law and its relation to morality, ethics, and politics. I don't agree. I think that the people of David's argument raises deep theoretical questions and deals with them in a thoroughly Kantian way, that is, in a way that can integrate it into the wider conception Kant has of law. Here's the plan of my talk. In the first part, I will analyze the people of David's argument. And in the second, I will examine the function it fulfills within Kant's system. The people of David's argument. There are three questions that must be dealt with in relation to this passage. The first refers to the very concept of devils, the second to the object of the devil's intervention, and the third to the argument Kant develops to substantiate his claim. What exactly is the people of devils? Some indications of the text itself will provide a clear picture. Devils are neither angels nor human beings. They are beings that have evil dispositions. Devils do not ignore the distinction between good and evil, morally right and morally wrong. They have not been morally lobotomized. On the contrary, they are aware of the evil they might cause. This does not mean that they cannot be but evil, in the sense of being naturally predisposed to sabotage morality. This is the reason of another important trait they share. They are susceptible to improvement. They may receive a good moral education, according to Kant. What is then their devilish aspect? It consists in their deep egocentrism. The devils are, at least initially, ready to violate any rules, be it moral or legal, in order to promote their personal selfish interests. They are typical rational egoists. They are constantly preoccupied by their own personal interests. And in order to follow their selfish inclinations, the devils rely rather upon their understanding, Verstand in German, than the reason, Vernunft in German. According to Kant, they are endowed with reason. He considers them explicitly as rational beings. However, it is by means of their mere understanding that devils can implement their egoist interests in a stable way over a sufficient long period of time. Why do the devils use their understanding instead of their reason? It's not a place to analyze the difference between reason and understanding in Kant's philosophy. We can simply remind that reason and not understanding is the supreme faculty of knowledge. From this point of view, the fact that the devils make use of their understanding is of crucial importance for Kant's argument. The task of the devils, as we will shortly see, is circumscribed. It's sufficient for the devils to use their understanding to accomplish this precise task. The mechanism of nature can be put to use through this cognitive faculty of theirs, so that the result is the same as if the devils had no evil dispositions. On the other hand, the devils, although driven by deep egoism, act collectively. On that point, an objection might be raised. Couldn't you say that the devil cum rational egoist is a variation of the well-known free rider, a human being who acts as a private person by caring solely about her own welfare, even in the public sphere? If the answer were affirmative, Kant would not be that remote from, say, Mondeville. His devils, exactly like Mondeville's bees, would act as private persons. I would opt for another, different approach. Kant explicitly states that all the devils need general laws for their own preservation. The English translation is slightly misleading in two respects. The German term translated by all is insgesamt, which means literally altogether, collectively. And the German term translated by need is verlangen, which literally means demand. In Kant's mind, the devils, although forming a multitude of beings and being inclined correctly to exempt themselves from the laws, demand general laws. Why this emphasis on general laws, but moreover, are demanded by the devils? These 2 points are of importance. On the one hand, the devils make demands, on the second, the demands refer to general laws. Concerning to the first point, and demand is perhaps not as strong as a claim, which obligates another person. But in any case, it is much stronger than a wish, or a recommendation, or the expression of a need. Concerning the second point, and which is far more important, the demand refers to general laws, neither individual, say, privileges, nor special provisions. General laws are positive, interpreted, and amended on a level which is neither secret nor private, but on the contrary, collective. Hence, we could say that the devil is able to leave the private sphere of his egoistic interests, or to put it more accurately, because of his egoism, a devil can transcend the limits of a private world and adopt a wider perspective. Thus, although the devil's motivation remains private, the change in perspective that takes place should not be underestimated. Kant does not seem interested to give an answer to the perennial problem of the free rider, but all the way down, rather. His devils participate into a collective endeavor. It's along with their fellow devils that they make demands concerning the state and its law. Their motivation may be private, but their acts are collective. What exactly is the object of the devil's intervention? It's on this point that an important divergence separates scholars and dealt with the argument from the people of devils. According to the commonly accepted view, the devils demand the establishment of the state as such. For example, Ottfried Höfe, followed by Catherine Flickschuh on that regard, holds that Kant takes interest in the figure of the devil as a starting point of the original contract to be concluded by human beings. According to this interpretation, the devils are beings that, out of purely selfish and prudential considerations, leave the state of nature to establish the state and to create the legal order. Law is an instrument which allows them to pursue their selfish inclination. It is as if Kant, from this point of view at least, were not that remote from Hobbes. They both seem to try to lay the foundation of law, but the law is laid upon the selfish, albeit informed interest of a multitude of beings. However, I think this interpretation can be contested. First, because it cannot find textual support. Some points of the text itself merit our attention. At the beginning of his demonstration, Kant demarcates himself clearly from those who consider that a republic must be a state made up of angels, and holds the only issue which matters is a good organization for the state, which is certainly within human capabilities. Thus, Kant does not agree with those who believe that political virtue is required for the republican state to come into existence, as perhaps Robespierre and his fellow Jacobins would believe. For him, the republican state is made up by human beings, human, and not devilish capabilities are required in that respect. The state is constituted by human beings, not by devils, armed with understanding and prudence. Further down, Kant is getting even clearer. The problem of establishing a state, no matter how hard it may sound, is solvable even for a nation of devils, if only they have understanding. The constitution of the state is not effectuated by, but in favor of the devils. The devils are not those who initiate and conclude the original contract. It's direct and efficient. There's an additional argument in favor of this interpretation, a systematic one. If the state were created by devils, the passage in question, written in 1795, as I told you, would be in tension with the doctrine of right contained in the Metaphysics of Morals, written 2 years later. As already noted, it is in this text, in this latter text, that Kant develops systematically his theory of law, which comprises, among others, his own version of the social contract theory. And such a tension would certainly be problematic, especially for a systematic philosopher like Kant. More specifically, the idea that the beings who conclude the original contract might be devils armed with prudence and based upon their selfish interest is in sheer opposition with 3 fundamental tenets of the doctrine of right, all of which are condensed in the phrase, each may impel the other by force to leave the state and enter into a rightful condition. First, according to the doctrine of right, the exit from the state of nature and the creation of the state are based neither upon free choice nor upon prudential calculation. If, on the one hand, man is not free to remain or not to remain in the state of nature, on the other, man is equally not guided by empirical and subjective or objective considerations. The validity of law is dependent neither on the imperfections of human nature nor on the harshness of the social or natural environment of human beings. Second, the consequence of the first observation is that a person is under the duty to leave the state of nature and to enter the juridical, simply according to Kant's word, condition. It is a duty, and this duty is a categorical duty. It is categorical to the extent that it does not depend on empirical presuppositions, which are hypothetical, and hence cannot justify this complicated process in a rational way. Third, what is moreover distinctive of this duty is that it corresponds in a perfectly Othelian, I would add, way to the claim addressed by any other person to the duty bearer to leave the state and enter the rightful condition, a claim armed moreover with force. According to the doctrine of right, unless an individual human being wants to renounce any consequence of right, the first thing it has to resolve upon is the principle that it must leave the state of nature, in which each follows its own judgment, and so enter into a condition in which what is recognized and belongs to it is determined by law and is allowed to it by adequate power, not its own, but an external power. End of quote. The power of law is the only that can guarantee that the claims of others obligate the individual human being by its being external and by not belonging to any other person, their own. It's not their own power. Hence, it is in a civil condition that rights that were provisional in the state of nature are secured by an authority putting them into effect. In that respect, law does not fulfill an instrumental function. Its validity is an end in itself. To sum up, contrary to the prevailing view as expressed by Othry, it's not up to the devils to exit the state of nature and create the civil condition. The radical egoism and prudence are not sufficient in view of neither the categorical character of the respective duties nor the external character of the power of law. The people of devils fulfill another function, the most difficult according to the terms of Kant himself, function. A function to maintain the rightful legal order, that is, the Republican Constitution. Once having clarified the object of the devil's intervention, we can move ahead by trying to tackle another question, namely the question whether Kant's claim that devils as a people have good reasons to abide by the law, whether that claim is justified. In other words, the question is whether the compliance with law, which has been created by human beings and guarantees their rights, can rely upon the selfish inclinations of the people of devils. Have beings who are inclined secretly to exempt themselves from the control of general laws valid reasons to abide by those laws? Kant makes two steps to give an answer to that question. His first step is into nature itself. It is nature, or better, the devil's selfish inclinations, as such that open a fruitful perspective. If the legal order is a good organization of the state, that is one in which the selfish inclinations are arranged in opposition to one another in such a way that one checks the destructive effect of the other, or even cancels it, the devils have enough reasons to be bound by the law. The argument goes like this. Because of her egoism, each one of them has good reasons to believe that it is not prudent to be said honest on her own. At the same time, because of her prudence, each one of them has equally good reasons to consider that it would be dangerous to be said dishonest towards another dishonest devil. Hence, each devil can accept that she has a common interest of second degree, the interest of not rewarding dishonesty. It is in that respect that the legal order should be a good organization of the state. Its function is to guarantee the existence of such interests of second degree. In other words, if such common interests are consecrated by law, the devils have good reasons, even in their eyes, to abide by law. Kant's second step leads him directly, albeit in a strange way, to morality. For it's not the case, it's by this phrase in 10 minutes, the text we read, it's not the case that a good state constitution is to be expected from inner morality. On the contrary, the good moral education of the people is to be expected from a good state, constitution. The idea here seems to be that by living according to a republican constitution, even a rational egoist might be educated into becoming moral and good, into becoming good citizens. A good constitution will contribute to the moral education and furthermore to the moral improvement of the citizens. Herein lies the moral impact of a republican constitution. To sum up this first part of the talk, according to Kant, based on the selfish inclinations and the prudential calculations, the devils can maintain a republican legal order, which, however, should be created by human beings for non-prudential reasons. The second part of the talk. What are the functions of the people devils argument? There is still a question that remains unanswered. Why does Kant appeal to the rational egoism of the devils rather than the virtue of the angels or the moral autonomy of human beings in his effort to assure the maintenance of the republican legal order? In other words, what is the function of the people of devils argument within the entire Kantian enterprise? My answer is that the figure of the radically egoistic devils allows Kant to delineate with precision law from morality. Not altogether, as we will see in the end, but to a certain extent. If law can be applied even by egoistic devils, its maintenance is disconnected from the virtue of angels, conceived as an ethical idea, as a conception of good. If, moreover, law is applied even by calculated devils, its maintenance is disconnected from the moral personality of human beings. In that respect, so I will argue, Kant intends to avoid the menace of morals. Let us reconstruct this argument. We have seen that the devils, when abiding by law, do not use their reason, but only their understanding, and do not rely upon moral reasons, but only upon reasons of interest. Wouldn't you conclude that, according to Kant, compliance with law does not rely upon any moral reasons whatsoever? And furthermore, that morality as such does not affect the act of compliance with the law? I would not go that far. I think that the relation between law and morality is more nuanced. In a sense, what is at stake here is the very notion of morality as defined by Kant. We should keep in mind that his devils are not moralists, but egoists. They bring forward their selfish inclinations, or to use another term, their own conception of the good. In that respect, the fact that, according to the argument from the people of devils, the devils can rely upon their selfish inclinations without being good, and moreover, without invoking genuine moral reasons, as for example, the principle of respect for other persons, does not undermine the claims of morality as such. With respect, there are 2 points that must be underlined. The first concerns the difference between devils and the Kantian angels. By insisting that the people of devils are in position to maintain the republican legal order, Kant aims to dissociate morality from ethics. His idea is that the maintenance of the republican legal order does not depend on the conceptions of good of radically egoist. At first sight, this seems strange. Isn't it the case that the devils abide by law based precisely on the personal conception of the good? However, such a conclusion would be tested. But the point Kant wants to make is rather the opposite. The decisive factors of the maintenance of the republican legal order are not the devil's egoistic conceptions of good. We saw that it's the good organization of the state which consists in the arrangement of the particular and probably opposed selfish inclinations in such a way that one checks the destructive effect of the other, or even cancels it. In other words, the reasons for the maintenance of the legal order are not the devil's conceptions of good as such, but rather the common interests of second degree. Kant claims that the devils are in position to understand where the common interest lies, to recognize it as such, and to act in conformity with it. The second point that is worthy of attention concerns the difference between the devils and human beings. As we saw, the devils use just their understanding, not their reason. Human beings, on the contrary, use the reason. I cannot present here the Kantian theory of practical reason and moral autonomy. We can, however, accept that for Kant, a morally autonomous human being, that is a person, acts out of reason, not simply according to reason. Or to put it differently, acts out of a principle of respect for other persons, not simply in accordance with the principle of respect for other persons. It is this precise point of view that devils, it is from this precise point of view that devils are not human beings. They cannot act out of respect for other persons. They can simply act in conformity with this principle. By adapting the extent that is public acts to the requirements of law. How is this treatment of the devils compared to both angels and human beings to be justified? My hypothesis is that by this mode, Kant intends to neutralize the menace of moralism. We know that the moralist believes that morality has a particularly extended domain, so that almost every aspect of personal, social, or political life belongs to it. Moreover, based on that belief, the moralist is inclined to formulate a moral judgment regarding such aspects with intransigence and rigidity. In the eyes of Kant, moralism is not tenable. The moralist violates the principle of respect towards other persons when she feels complete contempt towards a vicious human being, or when she denies any moral worth to such a human being. Let us try to unify the threads of our analysis till now. The argument from the people of depth fulfills two interrelated functions. On the one hand, it aims in a negative way at the neutralization of morals. On the other, it aims in a positive way at the confirmation of the principle of respect for other persons. There is a last but fundamental and quite delicate question that is still pending. This is a question that is still intriguing as at the beginning for this philosophical community has been my initial question. Should we consider Kant as a proto-positivist? How does Kant conceive the relation between law and morality? Let us examine whether the argument from the people of Athens throw light on this question. As you might guess, I have not the time to provide an answer, albeit an elementary one, to that question. That's why I must restrict myself to a very quick argument which needs refinement. I started by reformulating the question in the light of what has been examined that far. If we accept that the principle of respect for others requires the separation at least some parts of morality, should we also accept that justifies the validity of law as such? Yes and no. The relation between law and morality can be established in two ways, directly and indirectly. We may ask whether law is grounded directly on morality, while we also may ask in a more modest way whether law is a condition of the development of morality. It is true that the view of those who deny the necessary connection of morality and law has textual and substantive support in the Kantian thought. We might agree then that for Kant, even in the toughest social or psychological circumstances, it is possible to act out of duty, that is, freely in an internal sense. On the other hand, the argument from the people of Davids highlights the importance of the menace of moralism. Kant recognizes that it's crucial for human beings. Let us not forget that it's human beings and not devils who are under the duty to create a republican legal order. So Kant recognizes that it's crucial for human beings to be able to coexist in the framework of a legal order which can cancel the destructive effects of the coercive imposition of some aspects of morality on their lives. It is as if such a coercive imposition would endanger the exercise of their inner moral freedom. In other words, although it's true that even under the threat of the coercive imposition of the morality, persons may act out of inner freedom, it is also true that it would be much more difficult for them to put their inner freedom into practice. In that respect, law, the Republic Constitution, appears as a condition of the development of morality. Morality and law are interrelated. Thanks for your attention.